Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode we are going to be taking a look at the premier magic man of the guard, the Primaris Psyker. In case you've not seen one of these videos before, what I like to do is start off with a unit overview, going through the stats, war gear and abilities of the unit. We then move on to the deep dive, really getting into the nitty-gritty detail. After that, we wrap up with a final score and some final thoughts as well. So without further ado, let's witness their doom and dive right into today's video. So the first thing to understand about this unit is that the Primaris is a full-blown Psyker. Unlike the Astropath who we reviewed in the Regimental Advisor video, this guy is a lone independent character. He's like a senior officer. He can walk around doing his own thing. He doesn't need to be attached to another unit, and he doesn't come with an entourage like a command squad. Generally speaking, the Primaris Psyker brings psychic support to your force. But unlike officers who tend to focus purely on buffing their friends around them, the Psyker, his support comes in a few different forms. He can absolutely buff friendly units, but he can also debuff enemy units and just do some direct damage if he needs to as well. He's a pretty flexible guy. But despite being principally a support character, you may be surprised to learn that he's found in the HQ slot. Most guard support characters, such as regimental engineers, preachers, and commissars, are found in the elite slot, but the Primaris Psyker brings enough to the table that he has earned a place in the command structure of the guard. But now let's move on to his stat line, and it's pretty typical of what you could expect from a guard character. He comes with movement of 6, weapon skill 3 plus ballistic skill 3 plus strength 3, toughness 3, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8 and a 5 plus save. He comes equipped with a las pistol and a unique weapon, the force stave. Now we all know what the las pistol does, but the force stave's actually a pretty nasty piece of kit. It's a melee weapon that gives him plus 3 strength. That's the same as if he had a power fist, and it's AP -1 and D3 damage. Now don't be fooled, he's not a combat beast, but if you find your Primaris Psyker embroiled in combat, don't be surprised if he ends up bonking a marine or two on the head and making them go to sleep. However, the main reason you're taking this chap is for his psychic powers. And in the new 9th edition book, the Primaris Psyker has had a bit of a glow up. Previously, he was very limited in his psychic abilities, which was kind of sad for our #1 psychic dude. But no more! He's been back to college, he's done night schools, and now he is ready to hit the battlefield once again. He can attempt to manifest 2 psychic powers per turn, and he can also deny 1 enemy power as well. He knows Smite and 2 additional psychic powers from the Psyker discipline. Just a small side note here, but the Psyker discipline is the unique set of psychic powers that are only available to Imperial Guard Psykers. There's actually quite a good mix of them in there as well. There's some debuffing ones like Terrifying Visions and Mental Shackles that really mess up your opponent. And then you've got some direct damage dealing ones such as Gaze of the Emperor and Psychic Maelstrom. And finally, you've got those ones that can buff your own characters and units such as Psychic Barrier and Night Shroud. The point is, if you take a close look at the Psyker discipline, you can see that there are 2 of each kind of power, buffing, debuffing and direct damage. This means that you can build your Psyker to be specialized in one area of magic or another. You can make him a real nightmare for your opponents to deal with as he slows their units down with mental shackles and messes with their leadership and also with their stratagem capabilities with terrifying visions. Or you can have him purely focus on making a dead hard unit out of your own men with Night Shroud and Psychic Barrier. Or you can just keep him super simple and have him as a guy specializing in magic missiles where he does Smite and Gaze the Emperor and Psychic Maelstrom and just really just lays the hurt into those armies that have very little psychic defense, such as Necrons. Now, normally I would leave relics to later on, but as the Primaris Psyker doesn't have access to any upgrades or equipment like bolt pistols or power swords or anything like that, and he only has access to one unique relic, I figured it would be a good time to cover it here. The one relic that this guy has access to is the Psi Sigil of Sanction. If you put it on your Primaris Psyker, he knows an additional power from the Psyker discipline and also can attempt to manifest one additional psychic power, meaning this guy can try and cast 3 spells in one psychic phase. Personally, I think that there are 2 main ways to use this relic and by extension, use your Psyker. You should either completely and utterly specialize him, make him really good at one thing. You could take the Psi Sigil and give him access to both Gaze of the Emperor and also Psychic Maelstrom. And you're not really bothered what the 3rd power is that he knows, but the fact that he can cast 3 means he can do Smite and those 2 other damage dealers, making him a really good source of mortal wounds, just pumping him out. Or you go totally the other way and you make him a complete generalist, jack of all trades, master of none. You give him mental shackles to slow your opponent down, debuff him a little bit. You give your own unit Night Shroud like a dreadnought to make it trans hit. And then, just for fun, you season the whole thing with a little bit of mortal wounds at your opponent with a Psychic Maelstrom. He's not going to be blasting brains apart, he's not going to be super buffing all your units, but he's going to be doing a little bit of everything. So we've covered the general stats of this guy and we've started looking at the deep dive and how best to use him on the tabletop. But there's a few other little things we need to be aware of, a few pitfalls if you're planning on using this model. He might be really good for doing spells, but he's not particularly good at blocking enemy ones. You have no way of increasing the number of Deny the Witches that this guy can do. So he's not very good at psychic defense, and honestly, this is kind of one of the weaknesses of Guard in general. Even if you do take a Primaris Psyker or 2 and an Astropath, if you ever come across a faction that's really dedicated in the psychic phase, like Thousand Suns or Grey Knights, that's not going to make a difference. So if you're thinking of taking this guy to give you a bit of defense against warp trickery, I probably would think again. On top of this, he's actually really fragile for an HQ choice. He has less wounds than other standalone HQ choices such as senior officers, and yeah, he does have the same number of wounds as a Cadian or platoon commander, but he's got no command squad. He's not got extra bods that can jump in front of the bullets for him. He hasn't got a medic with a feel no pain. This guy will quite easily get picked off if you're not careful. And considering he's so fragile, so weedy, he's kind of pricey. He's 60 points. That's 10 points more than a Cadian Castellan. That is 25 points more than a Death Corps Marshal. Both of which are senior officers. Both of which are bringing, in my opinion, a lot more to the table than this guy. I mean, they hand out orders. Orders are really, really good. They have a reroll ones to hit aura around them. They have access to many more warlord traits and stratagems and relics. So I actually think the Primaris Psyker is a little bit overcosted. But speaking of officers, the Primaris Psyker isn't one. Now, you might think that's not such a big deal, but bear in mind that you're going to want to take secondaries like Inflexible Command, and you're reliant upon officers to do that. And you only have a limited number of HQ choices to really get that Inflexible Command on the board. So if you take a Primaris Psyker, you might end up finding yourself taking an extra officer in the elite slot, like a Commissar, that you don't really want to do, but you need it to make sure that you've got enough coverage to get off your secondaries. And one last small fly in the ointment is he doesn't benefit from regimental doctrines because he is a Militarum auxiliary unit. Now for characters, that's not such a big deal. Most of the time they're not going to benefit from born soldiers themselves. They rarely shoot their own weapons, but it does mean that technically you can't use the Primaris Psyker's leadership to boost other people around him like you can do with born soldier officers. Okay, putting all of this together, I'm going to give the Primaris Psyker a final score of 6 out of 10. Not great, not terrible. Overall, he is a decent character in his own right, and the fact that you can really specialize him in one thing is a nice Brucey bonus. But the problem is that he struggles to find his place in the HQ slots. Rarely have I gone into a game and gone, I really, really wish I had a Psyker. Often, I'm pretty grateful I didn't take a Psyker, because when I go to a tournament and I come across against Thousand Suns or Grey Knights, it lets me take Abhor the Witch, which is like an easy 15 points in a secondary, which if I took this guy, he'd stop me from doing. I think at the end of the day, the problem is that when I'm putting my list together, my HQ slots are already full. 2 Death Corps Marshals, Tank Commander, and a Command Squad. And I don't see any reason to give up any of those guys to take this guy in my army instead. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Are you Team Primaris Psyker, or do you prefer a cheeky astropath instead? Make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you thought today's episode was really fun or informative, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. One of the big perks of becoming a channel member or patron is you gain access to the Mordy and Glory Discord server, an online community with over 1,000 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, tactics, unit reviews, hobbying, painting, and we've even got a pretty spicy meme section as well. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all of the latest members. So thank you to Drottin Ulfa, Couch Spuds, SoCal Soft, Trent Silver, MCTA20D, Jake Alonso, I'm Adequate, Rory Langford, Mammoth Tank 117, David Elmy, John Westhorpe, Robert Anderson, Leonard Pohl, Daniel Hughes, and the voice of Todd. Thank you guys for doing your part. Big shout out to the latest Patreon supporters as well. Thank you to Captain Never Scared, Death Corps Commander, Peter Stella, Tyson Bowman, Craig Smith, Adam Canklin, and the Commissar 357. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ridemaster 134-1, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Thank you guys. Your generous support honestly makes such a huge difference, and I'm eternally grateful to each and every single one of you. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.